This is Leading Detection, a Sedulo podcast where fraud fighters talk tech. Welcome back to the Leading Detection podcast, and we're going to have some real good fun on this recording today. We're joined by David, and we're going to be talking about quite a controversial topic. We're going to be talking identity verification, and the question is it becoming redundant? David, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt. I'm really looking forward for the conversation.
It's going to be a good one. Loads of people talking about it. Really good to sit down with someone who actually knows the landscape and shed a bit of light on what's going on. So, yeah, identity verification, it's having a bit of a tough time at the moment, shall we say. So why is it important that we talk about this today?
Think about all the platforms which require your identity in order for you to be able to use them. So, in that sense, pretty much everything we're doing online require us to provide our identity or provide some kind of an identity.
Mm-hmm.
And, if organizations, if financial institutions, government, credit unions out there, but also social media, I want to make sure that the individuals who use their platforms are the real individuals, the individuals who actually own the identities that they're seeing on their platforms. They're going to have to verify the identities, because once you use someone else's identities, you can use the identity for all kinds of nefarious purposes that we are seeing criminals using.
Yeah, and we're seeing the definition of identity evolve, shall we say, as this digital world becomes the real world almost. So checking someone's ID when they sign up, like you mentioned, that's a snapshot, right? But point in time identity verification is no longer enough. So what do we mean when we say point in time verification?
It's a great question. When I think about point in time identity verifications, I'm thinking about someone providing their PIIs along with a driver license, or along with their picture holding their driver license, taking a selfie, or maybe taking a liveness video proving that they're alive by turning their heads right, left, up, down, right? I mean, these are, and sometimes even having a conversation, like a live conversation with the agent on the other line. These are, to me, so I don't want to say solution, but these are to me ways where we essentially verify that the individual in front of us essentially exists based on things that we're seeing at the moment right now. And it's really interesting. I mean, we're definitely seeing that a lot of organizations are using such solutions. The question is whether those solutions could be bypassed by fraudsters and individuals who are trying to bypass them. I mean, I think at this point, we all know that the driver licenses, the selfies, the videos, those could be easily faked by the criminals. We know that the criminals are essentially injecting all this information into the computer cameras that they're using during that process. And so on the spot verification, so to speaking, to me, is insufficient at this point. And we need to make sure that we have a more thorough way to verify folks' identities, other than simply asking them to provide a driver license as a name.
So how do we make that switch from kind of snapshot to full picture? Have we got the tools? Yeah. Have we got everything in place?
I think so. I think what needs to happen is we need to make sure that we have more historical signals around the identities that is trying to verify itself. You and I talked a little bit before this, right, about the topic, and I think I had mentioned that my PhD is in sociology, and I remember in one of my first theories class when we talked about major minds, major sociologists at the time, we talked about a guy by the name of Tunis. His contribution to sociology is very important because he, in a way, talk about the difference between community and society. Gesellschaft and Gemeinschaft. I mean, I have to say that in German just to sound smart, right?
Yep.
And the whole point is that Tunis is trying to convey is that explaining this shift from community to society is that some of our values, some of the ways we do things as a community had to change when we moved into a phase of a society and a state of a society. Because when we lived in small communities, everybody knew each other, and it was essentially fairly easy to sort of engage with folks. There was social cohesion. Um, you know, Friendship, solidarity, all those important keywords that we're talking about today, and that in a way, many of us believe that are lacking in the context of our society. And so, if you think about that in the context of identity verification, when we were in a state of a community here in the United States or in Britain or other places, when you entered the local bank and wanted to open a bank account or take a loan, it was fairly easy for the banker to verify that you are who you say you are, because he knew you, he knew your family, he or she, right? I mean, they knew who you were, so to speak. But at this point, it's very difficult, right, to know who you are, because we are in a state of a society, right? We have so many banks out there, so many people all over the world. You can open an account here in the United States from other places, right? And so at the end of the day, we need to make sure that the verification process follows similar steps to the step we took when we were a community, so to speak, right? That will in a way give us the full picture, right? That will allow us to assess whether you are who you say you are, or you're bluffing, right? And so the only way to do that in a society at this point is to make sure that we touch you as the person who's trying to onboard as many times as possible, looking at you trying to onboard or doing business with different organizations, or communicating with us from the same addresses or similar or several addresses throughout time, right? I mean, to see that you're consistent with respect to the IP addresses you're contacting different organizations from, the telephone numbers you're using while you're trying to onboard with different organizations. And we should do it over and over and over again, just to make sure that you're not bluffing, right? I mean, so to me, the historical signals and making sure that we look for information on individuals who are trying to onboard in different databases that we have access to, trying to simply verify that they are who they say they are, is the way to go, right? I mean, I'm not completely ignoring the importance of driver licenses and selfies and so on, but I think the to me, the bulk of the verification should be done before we actually ask for someone to provide a driver license or a passport. It should be done by us really verifying that all the PIIs that the individuals who are trying to onboard with us, including name, date of birth, social security number here in the United States, telephone number, address, IP address, they're all consistent with what we're seeing over time, right? It makes sense for us to sort of determine that individual is the individual who is really trying to onboard.
Yeah, because I mean, you mentioned it. We traded, rightly or wrongly, probably rightly because of the pace we're moving. We traded handshakes for selfies and trust, in-person trust for passwords, selfies, document scans, and it's kind of coming back to anchoring identity in reality, right? Because real people are messy. I think you mentioned a few points there. You've got old phone numbers, weird email addresses from college we don't want to admit to, gaps in the history. It's all a bit messy, right? So why do these signals matter so much? Is it because fraudsters struggle to fake this kind of data?
Fraudsters have issue faking history. And so I'll give you an example, right? One of the interesting phenomena I'm working on right now in the context of my assignment as a head of fraud insight and Centrelink is the issue of assumed identity abuse. This is a label that we came up with, but it essentially focuses on former legal U.S. immigrants here in the United States. So, you come here to the country, you come here to work, you come here to study, you come here to perform some kind of work which requires you to have a social security number as well as create a bank account, right? While you're here. You spend here a period of time, then you graduated, or you're no longer working here, you go back to your country, and the identity is left behind, so to speak.
Yeah.
Criminals really like those identities. Like they love using those identities because
Okay.
they're dormant identities, and those identities are identities of real individuals who were here in the
Mm.
country, who had some kind of historical evidence that they created, right? Merely by the fact that they got paid, they have the social security number, they had to create a
Mm.
bank account in order to get paid. But then the
Yeah.
identity and the bank account were left behind, so to speaking, right? And so
Yeah.
nobody is using them. And so the criminals know that, and so they take the identities and they try to create new accounts for those individuals. They try to take loan using those stolen identities. When they try to onboard, and you look at and you try, they try to onboard on with banks or the government or whatever. And when you look at the historical signals around them, you see a huge gap between the time that the identity was used, like the
Yeah.
last time the identity was used legitimately, sort of speaking, like to
Mhm.
create a bank account or whatever, and then the most recent time that the criminals have been using the identity to sort of try and onboard. There's
Mm.
there's a gap, there's mismatch with respect to the address they're using, right? I mean, the legitimate owner of the identity arrived to California. They opened a bank account in LA, but then you see that the criminals are using the same identity or the same social security number in Washington, D.C., trying to open a
Yeah.
bank account 10 years after, sort of speaking, right? I mean, so these gaps, right, are very important to flag, and those are the gaps which at the end of the day disclose that the criminals are essentially using someone else's identity to
Mhm.
try and onboard with a bank or try and take a loan, right? I mean, so those gaps are very important for us to try and detect, because at the end of the day, at the end of the day, they will tell us the whole story of whether the identity, the person who is using the identity is the legitimate owner of the identity or
Mm.
not.
Yeah, because what that says to me, there's a lot of moving parts there, right? There's a lot of like a lot of systems that need to start talking to each other, a lot of research to be done, a lot of collaboration. Is this where the fraudsters are thriving in these gaps?
They're doing their best
Mm.
to bridge those gaps. But again, if an immigrant got here, right, in a specific to a specific city, open a bank account in a specific time, like 10 years ago, and
Mhm.
then the identity hasn't been used for anything, right, for a long period of time, then and then someone is using it again. That's a strong reason for suspicion, right? I mean, that the criminals can't really do anything about, right? I mean, if I haven't used my social security number for 10 years, I haven't used it to create a new telephone line, or I haven't used it to create a new bank account or take a new
Mm.
loan or whatever, you can't really fake that issue, right? And use the identity like 10 years after from a different place, right? And try to create a new bank account without any questions around that,
Mm.
right? I mean, and that is something that fortunately the criminals still can fake
Yeah.
with the data they have access to.
Yeah. And people like you and I, should we be conscious of dormant accounts that we used to have about our own identity being kind of compromised?
100%. I mean, this is one of the things that I preach a lot about. The dormant accounts, the
Mm.
dormant identities are now being used heavily by fraudsters. In fact, I mean, I don't want to say that we're seeing a dramatic shift from
Yeah.
synthetic to abandoned identities. That's the term I use for those identities. But we definitely see that there are more and more solutions out there which are very good at flagging the fact that you're dealing with a synthetic identity, which is essentially a fake identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the criminals now prefer to use dormant identities of former legal immigrants here in the United States, or deceased individuals,
Mm.
babies, infants, adolescents and youth, identities of real individuals, which you can create some signals around, right? Instead of synthetic, um, simply because, the solutions, many of the solution will not be able to flag that. I mean, dormant identities will allow them to fly under the radar. So my recommendation is, if you have those accounts,
Yeah.
definitely make sure that you identify them. Here in the United States, there are a couple of consumer agencies you can
Okay.
actually apply for the report from. Early warning and checks system. You can ask for your annual report of the bank accounts you have under your name every year. It's free, and so I strongly recommend folks doing that. If you're abroad, you were here in the United States, right? And
Yeah.
you used your identity in order to get paid, and you had a social security number. My recommendation is for you to definitely take a look and see that no one has used the identity, because we are
Yeah.
seeing a lot of fraud rings actually using those identities.
Is it just kind of official banking or government accounts which are the lucrative ones for fraudsters, or is it my old MySpace account that might still be running somewhere?
Well, I mean, they use the identities in order to engage in financial fraud, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they will look for identities to work with in order to engage in that operation. We see that they use the identities to create not only bank accounts but also businesses around them. And then once you have the business, you can create a bank account for the business and then go for higher paying loans, so to speak. So
Got
I'm
it.
not sure about the MySpace account. I mean, the MySpace account maybe will give them indication of where were you 15, 20 years ago, whether you're here in the United States or over there. But folks are looking for the complete fools to work with in the context of that. So name, date of birth, social security number, indication you were here in the United States during that period of time, and the fact that you're no longer here. And one of the resources which will allow them to tell whether you're here in the United States or not is LinkedIn. And I mean, all I have
Yeah.
to do is just scroll down, look at where were you in 2017 and where you are today. And this is part of the way that we know what we know about many of the victims out there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
But another state of the times is that you can purchase LinkedIn accounts
Yeah.
that have whatever kind of numbers that you want to make work, then they're available
Yeah.
to you. So with these dormant accounts, it's kind of effectively saying the front door when it comes to identity verification is unlocked, right? So it's where most of the checks are. So what about the evolution of continuous monitoring after onboarding? So what's this all about?
It's really important question in my opinion, Matt, because we see the fraudsters are getting more and more sophisticated, right? That goes without saying, right? With AI, with the fact that they have insiders in financial institutions and the government tipping them and telling them what we're looking for is fraud fighters in order for them to be able to bypass. So one of the things that we are seeing many criminals do at this point is they use like stolen identities that have, and they use the legitimate address of the identity when they try to onboard with a bank or a credit union of the government. And then what they will do is a couple of weeks after, they will simply change the address to the address that they use as a mailbox, right? And that is problematic. We're seeing a lot of financial institutions actually flagging this issue right now because, again, when the criminals on board, they are on board with a legitimate address of the stolen identity that they're using, and then they're switching the addresses, and then they start funneling money and checks right to those addresses. And so, to me, one of the interesting thing and important thing that folks should be doing is they should constantly use the PIIs and refresh them and rescore them, so to speak, in order to make sure that nobody is using a stolen identity or synthetic identity in the context of their operation. There's no anomalies, right, in the identity, so to speak. Everybody's talking about the behavioral analytics of the accounts, how the cursor moves, like the type of transactions you have there, where you're communicating from. But I think taking into consideration identity and fluctuation and shifts in the PII along the identities should definitely be taken into consideration as well throughout the throughout the process of sort of making sure that the user is the real user, right, and not sort of a synthetic or stolen. So to me, constantly checking the PIIs and making sure that the historical signals around them match is something that organizations should be pushing and should be doing more and more moving forward.
And when we talk about the technology side, are we looking to real time, near real time, event triggered, weekly, month? where are we trying to get to?
I think it depends on the risk tolerance of organizations. It depends on
Okay.
the resources. You know, I don't have any specific recommendation. I think
Yeah.
that here in the United States, in the context of newly created bank account, there's a time frame where there's more scrutiny on accounts. That's I think
Mm.
3 months, something like
Yeah.
that. 3 months. Some organizations have 6 months now because of all the fraud we're seeing. But the thing with that is that the fraudsters are aware of those scrutiny periods, right? And so they will lay low, right, for 3 months, and after 3 months they will shift gears, change address, and start engaging in fraud, right? I mean, so
Mm.
so because of that issue, I would strongly recommend folks to not even tell us when they're gonna rerun the score. When are they going
Mm.
to re-verify our identity? Simply do it randomly, right? After a month and a half, after 6 months, after several months after we opened the account, rescoring the identity and trying to figure out whether the identity is legit or not.
So there's no traditional rules. It's kind of an identity lottery. We're just going to pick accounts out at random, rescore them, and that's probably a better way rather than these set rules, which fraudsters can. They're becoming more patient. They can wait 3-6 months now.
Think so, because think about it that way. Fraudsters constantly calculate the probability of detection, right?
Mm.
If they know the probability of detection, they will adjust themselves to make sure that they will run their operation in such a way that the probability of detection will be the lowest, so to speak. Right. So if I know that there's a lot of scrutiny on the account that I created for the first 3 months, then I will lay low for 3 months and I will hit the account on the fourth month.
Yeah.
But if I have no knowledge of the probability of detection, if I can't really form any probability around the probability of detection, then the operation might be more all over the place, so to speak, right? And so in a way, when you run those risk scores randomly, you mess up with their calculations of the probability of detections, right? I mean, they don't really know, like when it's all over the place, right? It's random. So when are you going to detect that I'm actually using a mule account, that I'm not really who I am, that I'm not really who I say I am? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So to me, doing those things randomly speaks more to the fraudster's attempt to calculate the probability of detection for their criminal activities. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Is there any push from the regulatory side? So the risk tolerance is all on the institution, depends on where you want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that makes perfect sense, because if you think about it, this is all resources. I mean, it takes resources, it takes financial resources, it takes manual resources sometimes to rescore and re-verify folks. So it's kind of dependent on the organization. I think that's how the regulator essentially treats it.
And the cost of fighting risk is just climbing and climbing. And on the other side, it appears committing fraud is becoming cheaper.
Yeah.
And cheaper.
It's it's one of the things that I talked a couple of months ago in one of those conferences we talked in. Right now it's fairly cheap for you to manufacture an identity, get all the documents you need for it. There's so many websites out there that you can go and create a fake document for $10, and then you pay another $10 to bring the image you want to bring to life. OBS Studio, which is one of the software the criminals are using in order to inject videos, is free to use. So for less than $50, usually, if you know what you're doing, you're able to bypass the controls that financial institutions have out there, which essentially cost millions of dollars to these. This is unfortunately where we're at. And I think that on the fraudster side, things will become even cheaper as we move forward. With agentic AI, I don't even want to think about that, right? I mean, we speak a lot of agentic AI and how those tools will bring fraud to the next level, so to speak, in terms of scalability. And in terms of efficiency as well.
Yeah. Is one of the goals to just try, because fraud's been around forever, right? And it's not going anywhere. Is one of the goals just to try and increase the costs for fraudsters, making where they used to, maybe they're spending $15 at the moment, try and push them to $25 per attempt? Is that one of the goals, one of the speed bumps?
I mean, so It depends on the type of fraud, and it depends on whose goals, right? I mean, as an academic, I have to tell you that my goal is to really understand how to disrupt the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So increasing the costs will definitely one of them. But
Yeah.
as a provider, like as a vendor out there, I mean, I would like to prevent as much as I can, right? So the
Mm.
goals really varies based on the hat you wear, I would
Yeah.
say, and of course the resources you have.
Yeah, because you sit at an interesting spot, right? Because you're in academia, you're very heavy on the research, but
Yeah.
you're on the commercial side as well. So
Yeah.
you're seeing both. What are the levers that academia are trying to pull and show that maybe the professional business side aren't ready yet for?
Academia usually tries to make sense out of what we're saying out there.
Mm.
So we simply trying to create better understanding of the ecosystem, the different actors across the ecosystem, and different scholars have different ways of approaching it. I mean, I try to be as hands-on as possible, so I spend a
Yeah.
lot of time with the criminals out there, with the defenders out there, with the enablers, the individual who essentially support the criminals in their operations. Of course, I spent a lot of time with some targets and victims. Um, my goal is to simply try and understand. In the context of my academic research, I try to understand what works and what doesn't in the context of crime
Mm.
prevention and mitigation. And
Yeah.
so I'm very much interested in assessing the effectiveness of different disruption strategies that we have out there. So for example, does taking down a website, a leak website, really helps in preventing the ransomware group from engaging in more and more attacks, right? I mean,
Mm.
we know that the answer is no. And if there is a fact, then it's very short lived, right? I mean, so that's what I'm interested in. That's what academics are interested in. The goal of the research is actually to help and guide policies, usually.
Yeah.
Law enforcement policies as well as governmental policies with respect to the way they sort of think about regulation around the issue of. On the commercial side, on the other hand, the research is more applied, right? I mean, we try to figure out like the best way to prevent fraudsters from trying to onboard with
Yeah.
financial institutions, the government, and so on, right? I mean, and once you find that solution, once you have those insights, you try to embed them and incorporate them in the context of the tools you have, the solutions you offer out there for
Mm-hmm.
purchase, right? I mean, so the goals are kind of different, but I'm lucky enough to be able to sit in both sort of disciplines, I would say. So
Yeah.
I think that my point of view is more comprehensive, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
have oversight both on the academic policy, but also the industrial world. So
Because academia is more probably on the prevention side and the professional side is probably more reactive, but you've
I
got to
don't
have a
know
bit
if
of a
academia
balance
is
of
on the
both.
prevention side, man. I mean, academia. So academia. So that's one of my issues. One of the issues I have with academia. I mean, we produce a lot of amazing research, but at the end of the
Mm.
day, we can't really do anything with it, right? I mean, people will read your research. So I will read the research and I will think,
Yeah.
this is an amazing research. This is how I'm going to push the envelope in order to me trying to understand
Mm.
what's going on. But in terms of prevention, most of us will not build tools to prevent. We will talk to
Mm.
policymakers and try to help
Yeah.
them prevent, right? But we're not going to do that. We're gonna be sitting on the sideline, so speaking, and just documenting what everybody's doing, trying to make sense whether it works or not. But we don't really prevent. Law enforcement prevent.
Mm.
The commercial side of things, businesses will try to prevent. On academia side, we just produce amazing research,
Yeah.
make it available for folks, and try to guide policy.
So more retrospective rather than kind of hypothetical.
Very retrospective. I mean, there will be hypothetical research as well. I mean, people will
Mm.
think about where things will go to in the future. I'm sorry, but less hands-on. I would say less the creation of tools that will allow. And then I mean, I know academics probably would not would not like what I hear about that. But our goal as academic is to really understand, guide policy,
Mm.
less I mean, we simply don't have the tool to prevent.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating position that you sit in between the two worlds, because I guess fraud hasn't changed, right? So maybe when we were younger, we'd have a fake identity and wouldn't get us very far. It might get us a
Hmm.
pack of 6 beers from the local off
Right.
license. But now with a teenager with a fake identity can do some damage in the world, right? So are the consequences so much bigger now than they were 10, 15 years ago?
It depends, right? I mean, it really depends on the type of fraud you're talking about. Like, if you think about that in the context of the person, like the
Mm,
adolescent. I mean, in the past you mentioned, um, you could have had a fake driver license and go to the local pub, right, and get a pint or two,
yeah.
right? Today, with a fake driver license, you can try and on board with OnlyFans, right, and create yourself a audience of millions seeing you engaging in all kind of activities on
Yeah.
OnlyFans. So that will be very different types of activity, different type of harm, so to speaking. But
Mm,
we're still talking about fraud. So very difficult for me to quantify the level of harm out
mm,
there. But we all know that folks are engaged in fraud, especially I mean, I don't want to say especially, but we see more and more adolescents and youth wanting in the fraud ecosystem, wanting in the fraud ecosystem,
mm,
either as mules or as individuals who help facilitate fraud. It's happening, unfortunately. So, but
yeah.
again, very difficult for me to quantify that, right? And say we see more of it today than we've seen like 20 years ago.
Mm,
Simply because it was a completely different society, completely different.
yeah. We said at the top of the show that identity verification is becoming redundant. It's obviously not. But what is the future for it? What needs to be done? What needs to be addressed quite quickly in the space?
Need to do better. So that goes without saying. The historical signals, we should still be using them in order to
Hmm.
verify that you are who you say you are. Having said that, we should still invest a lot in trying to figure out whether the documents you're submitting or the images you're seeing on the screen are AI created or not. I know that a lot of companies are trying to do that at the moment. The effort should continue. Granted, the criminals will continue to try and bypass the new solutions that we'll come up with, but that's the nature of the game, right? I mean,
Mm.
so in my mind, right, we need to continue to gather those historical signals, create databases which will allow us to verify that you are who you say you are, but at the same time, along the verification tunnel, making sure that the tools we're using are able to detect the fakes, the duds, right, and flag them quickly.
And anything that's kind of cutting edge that you could maybe share with us that you see coming up in the future when it comes to IDV?
With respect to solutions,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot going on there, right? I mean, but nothing at this point, nothing really new, right? I mean,
Mm,
there are a couple of solutions out there which focus on the driver licenses and what you can do with the
mm,
driver licenses, make sure that those driver licenses are legitimate or not, right? And so there are
yeah.
solutions there. There are companies out there focusing on um, assessing the assessing whether the person across from you from the camera is really legitimate or not by looking
Mm,
at they say that they look at the bloodstream, right, on the face, right,
oh,
trying to
wow.
determine whether you're legitimate or not. So there are solutions. There are companies working on developing those solutions, but we're still not in a point where the criminals can bypass those solutions, unfortunately.
I mean, from my own perspective, interviews one, I know hand in front of the face like that is quite a good one to
Yeah,
identify the
yeah,
deep fakes.
for sure.
W- Conscious of time, and we're close to the end, but what is out there, or what in theory would solve identity verification, but isn't possible right now with the technology that we have?
I think again, going back to the historical signals, I think the historical signals are the best solution right now. Um, Moving forward, again, we need to make sure that we work on the solutions. There will never be 100%. IDVs in my mind, because fraudsters
Mhm.
will constantly find way to bypass solutions, but we need to make sure that we bring their efforts or their success level to the minimum possible, right? In order to make
Mm.
sure that we do not continue to lose money and that they do not cause harm.
For that. Well, David, it's been an absolute pleasure. Such a unique vantage point you have on the space. So appreciate you joining us to share some of your wisdom. If people want to learn more about what you're working on or what's coming up, where can they find you? What conferences, events?
I'm very active on LinkedIn, so folks can definitely follow me there. I'm all
Mhm.
over, I travel a lot, speak a lot. So, I assume folks will be able to find me in one of the global conferences that they're attending.
Amazing. And if not, they will see you at the World Cup games.
Yeah, definitely. We're gonna spend mid-June and early July here in Atlanta to focus on some World Cup games. So
What a time. What a time. Well, David, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And to the listeners, until next time, ciao for now. Want to hear more about fighting fraud with tech? Subscribe to Leading Detection wherever you get your podcasts.